week's episode was brought to you by Brian Lucy, Rose Black, and Laszlo Panaflex. With supporters like you, we get to keep making shows every week and spelunking even further down the Leppian abyss in search of rare treasures and strange trinkets. If you'd like to join our merry band of bunnies, hear our extended shows, get stickers, and the key to our sacred grove where our silly little coven resides, please become a subscriber at www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where you can get all that stuff for starting at just $5 a month. When I discovered Stanley Kubrick's The Shining was so intentionally full of hidden meaning and esoteric content, my life changed forever, and by extension, it laid the groundwork for the idea behind The Whole Rabbit. Here's the thing though, until Mari and Darth Dingus convinced me to revisit our childhood favorite Silent Hill 2, I believed this level of meticulous esoteric signaling was reserved for serious films only. But I was wrong. Early PlayStation 2 survival horror classic, Silent Hill 2, like its predecessor, takes a profoundly deep, uncomfortable glimpse into the darkness of the human soul and tells a story of initiation into these mysteries through faithful use of occult symbolism, blending ancient and modern conception of divinity, mental health, sex, death, and alchemy in a way unparalleled in the video game world. Our research is almost 100% original, owing to us being able to replay the game in 4K, looking for every detail we could find, which were so numerous we almost had to do another episode. But we focus on the big ideas, so if you're an enthusiast of Silent Hill 2, or just interested in the occultism presented therein, we suspect you'll learn something new, and maybe even enjoy it too. Also, like James, I keep messing up the names Mary and Maria, so fair warning. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Yeah, I wish we would have conversations.
We can torture each other into conversation. That's how Twitter works.
Hey, Mari, do you think it would be fucking funny if they modded Shadow the Hedgehog into Silent Hill 2? Because, I mean, they share some unique dialogue lines. Like, they both go, Maria! You know, like every 5 minutes.
Yeah, no.
What? You can't just shoot me down like that.
Imagine how horrifying that'd be. You walk into one of the rooms and you hear like a and you see something spinning in the darkness, and you walk up to it and just like freezes, and its eyes lock upon you, and it's just Shadow the Hedgehog.
I'll pay Luke to read bad fanfiction.
Sideways.
Can we pay Luke to read bad Sonic fanfiction and other things?
Good.
As long as you write them. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we do more than peel away the fruity, stinky shells of the world and writhe around them like hot, juicy garbage for a week. Nay, we put them under the alchemical microscope and then superimpose them into a PlayStation 2 disc and then psychically put ourselves into the nightmare world to give ourselves an initiation into the realms of the Qliphoth. Because this week we explore the deeper meanings, occult themes, and spooky, esoteric, dark matter inside Team Silent's quintessential PlayStation 2 masterpiece, Silent Hill 2.
Personally, I prefer to collect the shells and make artificial facial hair out of them, since I can't grow any, to fill it in with a Sharpie.
I don't think James can either. That's why he's in the bathroom lamenting. It's because he can't grow any facial hair. That's probably what started it. He was looking in the mirror and he just knew deep down inside he was a little boy. Hi, everybody. I'm your host, Hack Rabbit, and I'm joined by the queen of all Kabbalists, Mari Sama.
Hi, I'm Mari.
The dastardly Deacon Dark Dingus, the messenger of mania himself.
Hi, I'm Mari.
Shut up. Why can't it just things be normal, please?
And special guest, industrial illusionist, who is a musician, occultist, and social commentator.
What up?
Profile picture is a nearly bald Barbie doll. It's a Barbie doll with a 5 head.
I'm a weirdo, like James.
Yeah, me too.
He looks so much like Danny from Dr. Sleep.
His hair is very greasy. So, yeah, Silent Hill 2. There's a lot of shit in this game I didn't know. It's actually really strange because I've been borderline obsessed with this title for nearly 5 years. But on the second playthrough, I feel like each of us that did play the game found so much that we don't really hear discussed in the internet, for everything from deep occult ties to just the extremely interpretive nature of this game as a piece of art.
Yeah, like when it's not storytelling with the occultist references, there's a lot of symbolism with color, clothing, hair, anything, angle of the camera. There's so much to this game.
It's a gorgeous game.
It really is. It still
Scary.
looks beautiful today, and I think it's also beautiful in general artistic sense. I think we should preface this entire episode, or at least I would like to, with an opinion that I have about this game, which is that there is no canon. This game is entirely interpretive, no set series of events, and no set ending.
And you can interpret things two ways as well, or multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised to learn I got a different ending than you two.
I was surprised you didn't get the suicide ending like a normal person.
Me too. Well, what we really aimed to do on the whole rabbit initially was to dig into the esoteric and deep interpretive content of media, especially stuff that was doing it on purpose, because we believe that artists can tap into that collective unconscious completely on accident. It's part of their resume, really. Silent Hill 2, I had no idea as a kid, is so dense with what we call FNORDs, hidden messages, esoteric content. I was blown away. I didn't even get to listen to Reinstall Paul's entire lecture about it because I was so laden with stuff just looking myself. I pushed myself to beat the game, to do the show. I had nightmares about it every single night that I played it, and that's unusual for me.
Really freaked me out too.
Guys,
It gave me night terrors when I was young, and I didn't sleep for years, it seems.
this game did the impossible for me and got scarier as I got older. I mean, there were things that I just wasn't mature enough to understand. And I think that's really a testament to this game's legacy as an art piece.
It made me obsessed with it, though. The underlying symbolisms and the patterns that are just pretty much universal to the human species. That's what enamored me, and I was entranced. And I could not stop researching it, and now I understand why I was so fixated on it. I would have nightmares about the monsters and stuff, but more specifically, I would play it with my friends in the middle of, we would play till like 12 or 1 in the morning, and then I'd have to drive about 45 minutes home in the middle of the night, and it would often be foggy when I was driving home, and I would see things. I would have panic attacks often when I was going home because it was so terrifying. Like, it would affect me after I left the game. And that's kind of what blew my mind about it.
When I first picked this game up, I was going through some very hard times, growing up. And I was in an abusive situation. And this game, playing through it, gave me a lot of catharsis somehow. That James could be such a fucked up person as I felt that I was at the time.
Yeah, that made me uncomfortable playing it because I was attempting to understand James, but I kept projecting my own shadow into what I was seeing. And by the end, I was a little brokenhearted feeling. It wasn't easy on my ego, but that's part of the game's formula. I was fascinated to learn that the first Silent Hill follows traditional alchemical formula of rebalancing the ego so that one might be ready to receive the light of the Holy Guardian Angel. And then there's a second part of that formula that Aleister Crowley and Thelema is a bit more known for because they made the imagery so colorful, interesting, and accessible, which is the second half of the formula called the N.O.X formula, where you dissolve your ego self so that your wedding to your personal God becomes a wedding between a transpersonal self and a transpersonal God. But from the eyes of the ego, it just looks like you're being destroyed. And so the game deals with that mystery in a really mature and sincere way. For somebody who was hunting for deep occult symbolism, I turned on the game and I took 4 steps. And I met with Demon Sigil with Hebrew lettering that sent me directly to my browser to start researching before I had any chance to solve any puzzles or do anything in the game.
Most people would gloss over this on a first playthrough or an initial glance as just being some weird script, especially back in the PS2 days where you were looking at this shit through a tube TV and it was just squiggles.
Yeah.
But the presence of this piece of graffiti and the fact that it's next to a broken toilet changes the meaning of the entire game, and you may completely miss it.
Thank you, Dingus. It absolutely does. So Fellow was looking through an old occult text and found a sigil of Lilith that lines up exactly with what we see next to the broken toilets. And the Hebrew letters are not actually nonsense. They correspond to 3 protective angels known as Senoi, Sansenoi, and Smenengaloth, who are said to protect children from Lilith while they're being born and shortly after their birth, before they have a chance to be baptized. Which is kind of interesting in and of itself, but it most specifically calls out Lilith, the demon, as a topic of the game, and the placement of her sigil and these Hebrew protective names right next to a bunch of broken toilets suggests that the character is going on a journey into the Qliphoth, which is the other side of the Kabbalistic tree of life, known as the Sitra Atra. It's perceived to be the realm opposite to holiness. While the tree of life corresponds to divine unity in all of its aspects, it's said to be surrounded by a shell, kind of like how the peels surround a fruit, of unholiness, falsehood, impurity, and false dualism, which conceals this holiness. And from a psychological perspective, you are drawn to these destructive forces as your ego is dissolved, essentially. So in order to arrive at truth, he's going into the underworld, which is full of basically shit. It's the refuse and the toilet, the excrement of the holy world. He's going into an exceedingly dark place that occultists are very cautious to even explore. So the fact that you're projecting into it as a video game is actually pretty horrifying. And the inclusion of those sigils might even be to protect young players who are playing the game.
Holy shit. This is hands down the most chilling thing that I've found in this game, because it actually ties into my life as an occultist in a very strange way. Long story short, about 6 months ago, I performed a form of symbolic ritualistic suicide with what's called a spell jar, which I had emptied into an ocean in the town of my birth. When I got back into the car, the song from the suicide ending, in which James drowns himself, begins to play. Full blast. Broken vessels. Now that I come back to this, it seems like it's a bit of a signal for some path work that I need to do.
In ancient Hebrew mysticism, the concept of this world was created from the breaking of 3 former worlds, which are sometimes referred to as vessels, because the idea was that these vessels were containers of the holy light, but they became overflowed and they broke. And then the shells of the vessel continued to they're like a shit fertilizer for the healthy part of the tree, is the way some people explain it. But psychologically, it corresponds to the aspects of ourself that we want to separate ourselves from in a dualistic way and say, that's not me. And in a modern psychological sense, it's the location that our projections come from, that our ego wants to separate itself from. And in doing so, it limits its own growth and it limits its own freedom. And so in a mythological sense, you have to integrate those parts of yourself. Otherwise, you're sort of a robot and you don't really have any freedom or control of your life, which is James.
Oh, shit. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, he's the puppet you're supposed to project onto.
Yeah, and he's deterministic.
Well, sometimes I hate that you can't choose his dialogue, though.
Yeah, it's pretty clunky.
Yeah, he says some really cringe stuff sometimes.
I have to tell you the truth. I love every single line of dialogue in this game.
It's so cringe sometimes.
It is, but I feel like that adds to its charm. It makes it feel kind of stilted and otherworldly.
Hold on, Maria. I'll be there soon.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Okay, I'll be right. Yeah, exactly. Like you don't say that. You're like, I'm coming to get you, babe. Like that's what you're supposed to say.
Leave us alone. Leave us both the hell alone.
Yeah, can he emote at least a little bit more? No wonder Barry yelled at him so much.
No, I love his first interaction with Laura, where she's like, "You're not going to yell at me, are you?" He's like, "Of course not. I'm not going to yell at you." "Oh, I have a letter from Mary." "You little bitch liar!" He's like, "Oh my God, James, come on,
bitch."
So anyway, in terms of being violent towards children, the image of Lilith is rather frightening. The first historical reference of it is a she-demon from the Sumerian king list, which dates to around 2400 BC. It states that the father of the great hero Gilgamesh was a Lilu demon. The Lilu was one of 4 demons belonging to a vampire or incubi-succubi class. Now, there is an occult text in the prison cell later in the game that pertains to the evocation of succubi. So the inclusion of Lilith is intentional. The first adversary that he runs into is, of course, spoiler, the boss of the game, who is Mary. It seems to be, at least from my perspective, a psychological projection of his desire or his libido, which to me sounds a little bit like the horror associated with the mysteries around Lilith, who is said to be created from clay as the same time as Adam, but because she refused to lay under him as a subordinate, she invoked the name of God and was like, get off of me and I'm gonna split. And she split from the Garden of Eden, and Adam's like, what the F, dude? And she got punished for it. She's the mother of all the demons because she was like fucking all the time and making all these demons.
All her spawn were horrible monsters, basically. She couldn't conceive like a natural good thing.
Come to think of it, I think this is a really interesting theme too, because James has some very interesting interactions with women throughout this game. The only 2 men in the game are James and Eddie. And Eddie, as we'll go into later, is likely only a projection of James. Most of the women in this game transform in some way. Mary becomes something else, or Maria does, rather. Angela certainly does, where she goes from being this meek and frightened character to asserting her power over James and using that to end her own life.
I like how there's 3 guardian angels associated with Lilith too, because he seems to... like the aspect of feminine power seems to be associated with, like, he associates it negatively is what I mean. And also the mother, the maiden, and the child, it's like a trifecta of feminine power you have between Laura, Maria, and Mary, because Mary Crone, the old lady who's died, and then Maria, the maiden, or like the sexually ripe woman, and then Laura is the inner child, or the young woman figure.
The crow, it's like the thing that's close to nature, the untamed spirit.
I think that he's seeing Mary and it's either he's seeing Mary in 3 different aspects, or I think he's really confronting his own inner femininity. Like, that's really what I think the story is about. Not necessarily his wife, but the processing of the guilt of what he's done.
Well, Pyramid Head being a rapist and Angela being a
Survivor, yeah.
I think that really reflects this idea of like James struggling with the fractured feminine.
Anyone can be a victim, but not everyone can be a survivor. And Angela is definitely, she changes, and she does her entire cycle, and she goes into the light.
She's the most mysterious figure in the game. I don't even have anything written about her, despite the fact she's on the cover. I don't really know what she represents or who she is in the game, despite having an opinion about what Mary might represent. Clearly, she's Lilith, but I would imagine she's a lot like Lisa Garland, as a projection of James's libido, and it can take the form of whatever he desires most. We also can suppose Lilith is important to the Silent Hill universe because she's said to be the consort of Samael. In a Kabbalistic sense, she's the form where Samael is the force. And we know that in the Silent Hill world, Samael is the god, who strangely takes the form of a female, which we might call Lilith.
If Lilith is a normal feminine aspect of God, then wouldn't she be male in this world of Silent Hill? Because it seems to invert stuff a lot.
Lilith continues to serve as source material for modern Western culture because she's seen in a new light now in modernity, because she's made of dust like Adam, and she refuses to be subservient. She wants to be an equal. So in the same way, James is reconsidering his views about women. And I think he has some very dark, twisted views about women. And so it stands to reason that his own inner femininity is blocked or obscured or occluded in some way. Rose Crowley from YouTube, who's a very good source on all the demons of the Qliphoth and the energies and deeper mysteries associated with, says that Lilith receives energy from Samael and infuses it into Malkut, which is the kingdom, the physical world, to dim the divine light of the holy presence. And that to this day, those protections that are in the game in the very first section are still placed above cribs of young Hebrew children.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a very real fear of Samael and Lilith in the world, and she corresponds to the dark shell of Malkut. So he's beginning his ascent down the tree of death, you could say.
I think this is backed up actually by the path that James follows into Silent Hill. He leaves the restroom and the broken vessel, and he ascends up this long, winding forest path. Personally, I interpret it as being the bowels, and he goes up into the cemetery.
And he enters Silent Hill from the east,
Grave.
going westward. So Silent Hill is opening its gate, its westward gate to him, and he's entering into the graveyard first through a twisted path. Also, the fact that the name is Silent Hill suggests something of a fairy mound or a sacred mountain.
So sacred mountains are actually central to certain religions and are the subjects of many legends. So for many, the first symbolic aspect of a mountain is the peak, because it's believed that it's closest to heaven or other religious worlds like the ethereal realm where the gods dwell. Mountain Olympus comes to mind.
Mount Kailash is believed to be the abode of the Hindu deities, Shiva and Parvati, and is considered sacred in 4 religions: Hinduism, Bon, I guess, Buddhism, and Jainism. Volcanoes, such as Mount Etna in Italy, were also considered sacred. Mount Etna being believed to be the home of Vulcan, the Roman god of fire and the forge.
Silent Hill is in Toluca County, and the lake there is called Toluca, and the name has its origin in the word Tolkien, which comes from the name of the god Tolo. It means the place of God, and it's in a bunch of the Aztec legends and stuff. It's a volcano down there as well, which strangely enough corresponds with the Greek Vulcan god.
It's referred to in a number of Aztec codices as Tolupetl, meaning hill of God. Tolo, an allusion to a nearby volcano. So it's a sacred mountain to the Aztecs, which we discovered that the settlers of Silent Hill have built their civilization on top of.
It's like a fairy mound.
I think there's this other really cool connection too, where Toluca Lake, there's that scene where he's rowing over it and it's the emotional abyss, right? But also the fact that it's an allusion to a volcano is James's explosive eruption of anger.
Oh, yeah, true.
That led to the events of Silent Hill 2.
Like, if Toluca is Mountain of God, then it's like Toluca Lake is an inversion of the mountain, and also an inversion of the elements of fire and water. So you have a feminine, it's like a feminine inversion of the actual meaning of Toluca,
Yes.
which is another, it's another allusion to how the religion is twisted and almost upside down, and you do go to the upside down, so to speak.
That was the divinity that was there before settlers came back in the day for Silent Hill. So it already had a history of this like godly energy associated with it.
Yeah, and the cult is true by the way that it reflects the energies of the earth that it sits upon. Because usually these things happen in the town. Like the town itself has some kind of effect. But apparently it can, you know how in the first game Cheryl was drawn to the town because she was part of it? So it can affect people outside the town if they are a part of it.
I think it describes like the quality of a larger region. Like Silent Hill is just a town, but really like the ghost shit can happen anywhere within 50 miles of Silent Hill.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's an entire region, I would say, because there in the future games too, there's a couple of other towns they reference around the area where similar things happen.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Trivia, in the movie they reference a coal mine, and later on in the games it's actually revealed that Dahlia's father owned a coal mine across, like in the same region that it burned down and they went out of business.
I do like the attempts at continuity in the series. Too bad they pissed me off with the Pyramid Head shit.
I know, right?
Oh my god. But I guess while we're on the subject, we should describe what Silent Hill does. Whatever you want to call that. So essentially the entity that is Silent Hill is something that can take the emotional or psychological turmoil of a person and project it into reality. It can give it flesh and blood. You know, James can actually leave town with Maria, who is just a doppelganger that the town created.
Homunculus.
Homunculus, yeah, is what I also call it.
I was gonna say that.
I was gonna say it first.
He did say it first, and I stole it from him.
Yeah, dick.
Now, you mentioned
Okay.
the use of color and how he's entering Silent Hill. I couldn't help but notice he's completely earth-toned, which, if he's entering into the realm of Lilith and Malkuth, those are the associated colors. He would be moving down into the Tree of Shadow. Interestingly, the name James goes back to the Hebrew Jacob, and it means to grasp the heel, which is a Hebrew idiom for deceptive behavior.
Ooh.
And James certainly does deceive the player throughout the entire game.
And himself.
Well, I think he
Mhm.
deceives himself more because he tries
Yeah.
to appeal to people up front and be like, "Oh no, I really love you and I care about you," but his actions speak differently.
Me? No.
No,
I
James.
never kill myself.
It also says he grasps at the heel, and I think there's some significant thing with where he puts his hands in the game, you know? It's always somewhere gross.
No, like in the
God.
toilet.
Dude, that scene where he reaches into the toilet is just perfectly disgusting.
He's like, "Huh, that's a nasty toilet," and then he just goes for it.
But he doesn't just go for it. He hangs out there for a minute.
In there by the elbow. Like, what do you?
Yeah, and there's shit floating in the top of this. I don't know if it's literal shit, but it's shit like
Just hanging on, shoving it down there, like
plunging the shit with his arm.
punching everything.
And he
Ugh.
pulls out a wallet. He doesn't
I
even
hope-
wash his fucking hands.
But there's no money in it either.
He gives you a mad foot massage, though, if you let him.
I'm so uncomfortable now.
Because he's not afraid to get his hands dirty.
Exactly.
I'm never gonna be able to not think about the places where he'd had it beforehand, though. Like the fucking slimy hole in that room.
I mean, he had to take care of his disgusting dying wife. He can handle anything now.
Wait, before we get on too much further. I think it's really cool how in that room where he reaches into that hole in the wall and he pricks his finger on something and he yanks it out. I think that's kind of an illusion for how if you're trying to self-analyze, you know, or you come up on a thought that bothers you, it seems like you can forget it just like a moment later, and you kind of have to struggle to come back to it.
That room is pretty significant in the game and the symbolism associated with, because it has a bunch of butterflies in it, which has significance to Japanese culture. Also, we see it as a tattoo on Maria.
Maria!
Doesn't she have like a butterfly or something?
Yeah, so the
On her
the
stomach.
butterfly is an interesting symbol in Japan. So typically, in this context, it's a play on this idea that if you ever see two butterflies in Japan, I think it's specifically if some lovers do, you know, that means that two lovers had committed suicide, and those were their souls or whatever they would call souls. So Maria only having one, it instantly kind of puts people off because you're supposed to see that symbol in pairs, right?
But Maria
when it's
represents
paired,
his
it's good.
desire. Maria represents his desire. So is it that he does? Because his wife is dead. So is that saying his desire is to take his own life and join her, like with the becoming the
James is
butterfly?
Yeah.
If anybody can say that more eloquently, please do.
So I think because Maria represents James's desire, she has a butterfly on her hip because it means that James might want to kill himself in order to transition to the other side and become a butterfly. As in Japanese culture, the butterfly is associated with death, and specifically lovers who take each other's lives, like Romeo and Juliet. The symbolism makes some sense because he gets the infamous clock key out of that clogged toilet. You can hear a wobbly mechanical noise whirring in the background, and in my opinion, this is signaling the mechanical nature of both sex and death, but most importantly, death leading again to new life, which is a biological reality for the butterfly and a metaphor for the soul's transition into new life after death, of the body, that is. In Buddhist culture, it's seen more like a womb because of a long-held conception of reincarnation, something the butterfly does biologically through the cocoon stage where it liquefies its body to reform into a newer, more subtle, etheric one. Part of Buddhist tradition is recognizing the mechanical nature of this wheel's turning as a condition of continued unconscious desire to partake in its revolutions through birth, life, suffering, and death, only to begin the topsy-turvy cycle again and again and again and again. This is conceptualized as dukkha, which means wobbly wheel, and pertains to the suffering inherent in a life bound to incarnation. Likewise, in Buddhist tradition, one would need to extinguish one's attachment or desire, which in this case I think is Maria, to escape this cycle. In a Freudian or Jungian sense, we might focus on the more human, less Buddha heroic level of having a healthy relationship to our libido or desire or Maria. In fact, allowing an aberration like Pyramid Head to completely kill or extinguish one's desire or libido would be considered a bad thing, and James reacts appropriately defeated by the loss of it. So at first, the character Maria might be a confusing, multi-faced, she ends up being a rather useful tool for understanding the complex modes of James' various desires. The key he receives in room 202 goes to a broken clock, which reads, "The scars from the past will remove the nail that stops time," suggesting his attachment to the past has caused the wheel to stop ticking entirely, which would never allow him to leave in the Buddhist sense, never allowing him the opportunity to escape it. According to the Bardo Thodol, until one identifies as the gods and demons emanating from their own heart and brain as it deteriorates, the soul is made to flee them in terror until it takes up residence in the sexual congress of their future parents as a respite, beginning the cycle of suffering and dukkha anew.
That's quite a bit. I actually found that really interesting, what you said about the necessity of one having a healthy relationship with their desires, and how James's unhealthy relationship keeps him trapped in this state of being in Silent Hill, because you see in the leave ending, big spoiler warning, James killed his wife because his wife was getting all crabby and pissy because she was dying of a terrible illness and saying mean things to him and not letting him fuck.
And he killed her for it.
And what was I saying before I said that?
Well, he has to go through all this just to admit it.
Yeah, he does. So Maria is essentially his idealized Mary. In one ending, he can leave with Maria. The last thing he says after she coughs is, "Better watch that cough." The cycle repeats itself.
Oh no, because he's going to want to punish himself again and again until he figures out what he's done. Because he needs her to punish him, is what he says.
I think it's a little bit of a play between her and Pyramid Head. But yeah, and that's interesting too, because it shows James's internalized manic consumption, just like Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head being the rapist character.
And well, also in the final scene with Maria, when she's finally killed off, it's two Pyramid Head figures that actually you try to fight them and they'll just impale their heads on their pikes. So it's like a double ritualistic murder. The executioners kill themselves after they kill Maria for the third. I believe it's the third time.
Once they fulfill their purpose, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the shadow's not fighting itself, or it's not fighting James or really itself anymore. It's killing itself.
Essentially,
because he had to confront that 3 times, so it's about time that he goes to the final stage, and then you see what happens later.
Maybe we can discuss who Pyramid Head is in detail, because he's a bit of a complex symbol, and he's really important to Silent Hill 2.
I've honestly had the hardest time wrapping my head around this character until very recent.
Mari, didn't you dress up as Pyramid Head one year for Halloween?
Stop it.
You did, didn't you?
Also, I found out researching for this that apparently most of the for Pyramid Head, like it's like 80, almost 80% female.
Yeah, that was an interesting fact.
I saw a male one once and it was cool, but yeah, it's almost all women.
Pyramid Head is dressed up like an executioner. James sees it in himself that he should be punished for the evil things that he did, this is the very like energy. This is the energy that comes for him to punish him, and
It's the same one that got him into the mess in the first place.
But it's also like needed for him to come out of it in the first place. This horrible place. He needs Pyramid Head. He's
Well,
in
yeah,
most
because
of
he
the-
has to project onto something first, right? In order to identify it in himself.
Here's the thing that I find interesting is that by needing Pyramid Head is completely made up of James's repressed, violent and aggressive urges and lust.
Yeah.
It's like a deep
Anger, but it's not necessarily like cerebral anger. Like, you know how Eddie reasons his way into stuff? Like into violence in the game.
Pyramid
He like,
Head.
thinks about it. Pyramid Head doesn't. He acts like an animal, and
He's a savage.
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
But he represents that side of James as well, and like James doesn't realize that till later.
Johnny!
But the first time you encounter him, James either confronts Pyramid Head, tries to fight him, and you quickly realize you can't do it, so you learn to run from him. The first time you see him, there's a bar, like a set of rusty jail bars between you. So there's like this block. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to confront it, right? But then the second time you confront him, it's outside of some building, and you're like, you have to try to fight him or knock him back, and then you just run. And every time after that, you're just running. And then the next time you see him, and you see him actually abusing other monsters, you actually hide because you're too afraid to confront your shadow. So then you watch what your shadow is doing. So it's like in my personal opinion, like the idea of James hiding in a closet and watching Pyramid Head hurt other things is, have you ever heard of somebody who just like split personality has this where the other personality doesn't know what the first personality did?
Yeah.
Or you can go into a fugue state and then actually perform something that you don't remember later, or you have like selective amnesia.
You're
So,
watching
like,
yourself from the outside. You're dissociated from the act.
Yes, you're dissociating, and exactly, but it's more of a, I feel like this is a representation of more of a physical disassociation, which some serial killer or like people that kill people all the time, or they go into psychoses and they do it, they often will recall the murder as like, I don't remember anything happening. I just woke up and I had done it. You know, you hear a lot of stories like that. Like, it seems like a very human way to relate to your darkest urges. And
It's like a sub-personality takes over when they...
I think James has fractured himself. Like the things, I think he's done a lot more to Mary than just what the game implies. I think he has a lot more guilt behind what he's done, and Maria and Pyramid Head kind of signify like maybe he's used other people or hurt other people.
Yeah.
Because he was frustrated with his wife who was dying in a hospital.
So what's the feminine aspect of the pyramid, Mari? You mentioned that and it gave me a lot to think about.
Oh, bro, this like blew my mind. Like we were talking about how like all like most of the cosplayers are female and they're like infatuated with this like animalistic masculine energy. But here's the cool thing about it is I realized that if you look at the original textures and stuff, not from the movies, that's interpretive. If you look at the textures, his head is like, obviously it looks like a cage because it's a normal man's body with this giant knife. And it should, where its head should be is this giant pyramid thing. And it looks like it's made out of maybe rusty metal or something, but it's very hard to make out what it is. And it gets dark, like within the triangles, it like kind of darkens as if it like goes into a pit. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it kind of looks like the edges of the triangle are pronounced, and then it's like a pyramid made up of inverted pyramids, if you could imagine that. And here's the funny point about this point is we're always talking about how Silent Hill inverts sexual symbolism all the time. So Pyramid Head is a masculine figure with a phallic blade that he penetrates you with and kills you with violence and anger, and he's the color red. And then, but you have this hat or like head cage made out of inverted pyramids, which would be again a chalice or a female womb symbol.
Good old vagina head.
His little helmet exactly it's made up of many vaginas though. So I would say that it's goddess energy, like a collective female energy is encasing his head. And what does the head represent in occult studies, even in chakra systems?
Mental
head-
faculties.
Your mental, and also the way that you talk and you speak and you communicate with other people.
Yes.
So it encompasses his neck as well, which is that's your throat chakra, and then your forehead, which is your psychic, like how you in tune with other people, like how you intuit things and how you relate to other people and empathize, and also your crown chakra, which is your connection with God. So and your mental faculties, your brain. How do you think about something logically versus like, okay, I really want to kill this guy. Like, say I'm angry at someone, I really want to kill this guy, but I know I probably shouldn't do that because it's immoral. Like, Pyramid Head has all of that cut off by a completely feminine energy.
He's occluded.
I think
Though he abuses the female sex and the female form, he is endlessly imprisoned and blinded by it as well.
Yeah, he's like obsessed with it, I think is the idea.
He's an incel, dude. His shadow is an incel.
Like James's sexual frustration is projected into other monsters in the town.
So James witnesses a sexual act between Pyramid Head and the two mannequins, shot in the style similar to a scene in Blue Velvet. I'm guilty of not having seen this film. I'm left with traditional Freudian interpretation of this scene as what a sex act might look like to a kid, specifically a boy. This is once again where I feel we throw Freud under the bus unfairly. So we start with an example just about anyone would understand. What might the internal struggle be like for a child who, concerned for their mother's safety, catches a traumatically inappropriate glimpse of their parents in a passionate, loud, or rough sex act?
Hide in the closet or under the bed.
Well, I mean, but what are they thinking? After all, if daddy is killing mommy brutally, who's next? Besides, and statistically speaking, who is most likely to kill the family?
Definitely the dad.
So is the child's fear completely unfounded? Is the Oedipal complex bullshit? I don't think so at all. I think this is where we take his ideas about the Oedipal complex and blow them completely out of proportion and make him seem ridiculous when we're not. Jung says we commit the error in pomposity to assume ourselves as so lofty above the ancients that we ought to consider that what horrifies them is the same thing that horrifies us, and that exploring their mythologies from a distance with our own erudition, we allow ourselves to glimpse ourselves in that same way with the same distance and objectivity. So Oedipus, who's blind, he can't see because he's so occluded by his own obsessive, male, essentially
material desires. Well, that's why Pyramid Head uses mannequins. He wants to use women as if they were objects with no heads or expressions or faces.
Yes. As just body parts, because we see so many of the monsters. What do they look like?
Women.
Body parts put together.
But some of them got tight asses, right?
Tight asses, and
Absolutely.
they've got weird fucking vaginal looking lips and shit like that. Like
then there's the one that spits acid on you, which is apparently related to how Mary yelled at James all the time. So he must have gotten caught getting the stank finger and come home. And she's too sick, and she's too sick to do. She's too sick to be his seductor. She needs a man in the house, and he's out doing that. I'm sure he's been to the Heaven's Night and the motel, and Maria is a morph of Mary crossed with the many women that he's been with there.
Oh shit.
I think that's a great interpretation because in the canon, doesn't he meet his wife at the Heaven's Night?
I'm not sure about that.
I think that kind of plays into
in there. They vacation at that hotel once, and then she chooses hospice there when she's dying.
Mary has an express character trait of being quote unquote conservative in almost all the literature about this game. I don't think they met at Heaven's Night.
Now, Maria associated with Heaven's Night, but I think it's because she's a hooker that he projected this fantasy onto.
Oh, this is really interesting.
She was a dancer at Heaven's Night.
Yeah.
There's only
who is
Maria. She's a dancer at Heaven's Night.
Get this. There's only one place in the game that Heaven's Night is advertised, right? It's in the bathroom right next to that fucking drawing of Lilith, and it's got Maria on the front.
It's
there's
her face.
Maria, and Maria is probably one of Lilith's too.
She might be his Lilith. That's what I think she is. She manifests as all his desires, because in the ancient Judaic situation, it was understood that if a man who is single was left alone in the house overnight, then Lilith was very likely to, quote, come upon him. I think that, like, she's supposed to seduce men in their sleep, and she becomes pregnant with like sperm that you emit during the night that you didn't mean to. And then this gives birth to the demonic children, which I guess would be the aberrations. So it's a representation of him masturbating over things that he wants, and then those things becoming aberrations in his psyche that torment him. Also, Lilith is associated with suffocating and strangling, which is the
Suffocating, pretty relevant on this day of Derek Chauvin suffocating a guy.
Suffocating yourself on weed.
Shit.
I actually thought of that while I
Silent
was
Hill.
choking on weed.
James totally suffocated his wife to death. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Hey, Rabbit.
Oh, god damn it.
Yeah, he did it. He did it with a pillow.
Why? Because of his desires, which are anthropomorphized as
Pyramid Maria.
Pyramid Maria.
Pyramid Maria.
they are related, right? Because if Maria is sex and the pyramid head is death, the problem with those two things is seeing them as a duality. Part of initiation is reconciling those two forces, which is why when he gives up, Mari mentioned this earlier, when he defeats her, like, the pyramid heads kill themselves.
Because they have nothing left to fight about.
I think that's also a metaphor for James coming to the point where he is faced with the undeniable truth of his actions.
Yeah.
Like, he's no longer capable of living in denial. And so the conditions that created Pyramid Head disappear.
Absolutely.
He says that too before he fights both of them.
That's why I needed you to punish me for my sins. Doesn't he say it's like, it's time to end this?
Yep.
He's, what's that thing that you're going, what's that thing that Shadow says about?
No.
You're going right back where you came from, Doctor. Straight to hell. And then he karate chopped him in the head and he died. He killed Eggman. So I don't know where he's going to put this in, but I found it interesting that Maria being associated with Lilith, succubi, the literal first thing that Maria does is flirt with James and put his hand straight up on her tit. She's probably, the way that I've been interpreting it this whole time is that Maria is probably the first person to even touch James. And so she lures him deeper and deeper into his own psychological abyss by donning the guise of what he desires most.
Well, we see that Pyramid Head is playing with these, like, sex dolls, maybe in the same way that he sees women. It might also be possible that these demons that are created, these aberrations in his psyche, reflect the things he's been jerking off over. Because what are they? They're like mannequins, and nurses, and then the
A
spitters.
really strong dude with a giant knife.
So, like, he may have had sex with his wife, but her face is all messed up. But he could still, like,
Oh, that's grimy.
right?
Well,
So maybe
he's-
that's what the spitters represent.
Well, also the vitriol that she said to him. I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that before.
So that's a combination of all those things at the same time. Well,
So
he's also
Green
checking out the nurses that are inside of the hospital,
he sees Mary as a monster, whereas Maria appears as a person to him.
because that's what he
Oh.
desires. It's what he wants.
So Laura is totally his inner child.
Yeah, this is something that I didn't really notice or appreciate until this playthrough. Until this playthrough, I was operating under the assumption that everybody in Silent Hill was their own person. But Laura is totally the driving factor, the driving force in leading James through Silent Hill and to his fate.
I think he represents his innocence. You know how he tries to act like he doesn't know what's going on? Like, if I got a letter from somebody I could confirm was dead because I killed them, do you think I would really go where the letter told me to go? Hell no, I'd burn that shit and forget about it.
You have to be kind of naive, and you have to. She's leading him along his journey.
He knows
And-
why he's there, I think. And then she's using his curiosity. And also the first time you meet her, she actually teases him from behind the bars. So he's, again, he's blocked off from his inner child. He's blocked from how he feels inside when he first gets there.
But it's by
James-
following her is like what leads him through this journey.
Yes.
He is absolutely desperate to be absolved of what he has done.
Well, his subconscious, innocent self is, and that's his drive. That's their driving force because, you know, Luke, the ending you got where you go away with Maria and she's going to die again, and you know she will. Like, he's chosen to stay in purgatory. He's like, you know, I didn't really learn anything. I'm just going to stay here because this chick is hot and she let me touch her boob. So he hadn't really learned anything.
That's not the ending I got in the game. That's the ending I got in real life, Mari. Thank you.
Aw.
No, I got the ending where he leaves with Laura.
I got the real life in water ending.
Oh, you didn't get the one where she's going to die? Where Maria's going to die?
No, he realizes what he did. Then he reads the letter that that Maria gave. God, I can't get the names
Okay.
messed up, just like
So
James.
you left with Laura.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, you left intact.
Yeah,
So
this
you
with
got
Laura.
the good,
Yeah,
again. Okay, you got the good ending. Wow.
Okay, so while we're bringing up the multiple endings topic, I just want to I just want to bring up something interesting about James and the meaning of his name. James, roughly paraphrasing from the wiki here, James Sunderland. Sunderland means
Southland, like south, a land that's south of something.
it
But
was
it all-
more reference to something being torn apart. So his reality, it's an allusion to how his reality is being torn apart. And this is kind of this forms the crux of my my position. This game is 100% interpretive. Along with the different endings, there are just many clues in this game that the events aren't set. If you go into the bowling alley, there are many hidden clues that James is actually alone. Like there's evidence to this theory. First off, the song that plays in the bowling alley, if you're familiar with the soundtrack, is Alone in the Town. Yet this is perhaps the most social scene in the game.
Yeah.
With, 3 characters talking at once, right?
Mhm.
Also consider that at no point in the game do you ever see 2 characters in one scene
Right.
or in one shot.
Laura talks to Eddie.
Laura talks to Eddie, and then as soon as James gets into the room, it cuts to black. Also consider that he hears Eddie through the wall first, so I think it kind of portrays this transition in which parts of him are coming to consciousness, you know, where he's
Mhm.
having his dialogue.
Well, who does Laura come to Silent Hill with?
She comes with Eddie because she's closer in time to Eddie, his teenage self.
And I believe there's an interaction inside the mental hospital that reveals their connection.
And if you want to hear more about that, then you are going to have to pay my sorry bunny butt at least $5 to get all the extended shows at www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where you'll also get access to our Discord server, and then I send you 2 bonus stickers where your actual $5 mostly just go to shipping. And it's a good time, so please consider checking it out. We're going to talk for a whole other hour about Silent Hill 2, but it goes into some very dark territory and some occult territory that pertains to Thelema, Aleister Crowley, and Crossing the Abyss. If you'd like to hear more about it, you're just gonna have to
Eat carrots.
Shoot lasers.